Good morning. Thank you for being here with us today for our State of Crime meeting with our advisory neighborhood commissioners. We want to thank you for joining us from across the city in all 8 wards. And to kick us off, we're going to hear from Mayor Bowser. So without further ado, Mayor Muriel Bowser.
Thank you, Tomas. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. I want to thank you for being here. I want to thank you for taking time out on your Saturday morning to really talk about the most important issue in the district right now. And that is how we keep our city safe and how we are working together to fight crime in Washington, D.C. I invited all members of advisory neighborhood commissions across all 8 wards to join us. And I want us to have a very productive conversation about what we all can do together to make our city safer. We do have prepared comments from the top, but I want to assure you that we will also have opportunities to hear from ANC commissioners. We have our overflow room. We are being recorded by our channel 16, and recordings of this meeting will be available. I had a similar meeting about a week ago with school officials where I thought it was extremely productive, candid conversations, solutions-oriented, where we could really get down to brass tacks about what we need to do in our city. And I am hopeful that we can have a similar discussion today. There are members of my administration who are here. If they could just stand up where they're seated. And you will have the opportunity to talk to them at your tables, talk to them after the meeting, and have a productive dialogue. In the bleachers, I am guessing, are other interested community members, members of the press, and agency officials, along with ANC commissioners at the round tables. I will prioritize hearing from ANC commissioners at this meeting. So everyone else, I'm just asking you to be respectful of that. So that's why we are here. I want you to know very clearly that I feel a great anxiety in the city, across the city, about safety. You know that I grew up in Washington, D.C. You know I grew up in the height of the crack epidemic in Ward 5 in North Michigan Park. You know I grew up in a town that had over 400 homicides in a year. And I feel more anxiety across the city right now about safety. Now, you may say, how could that be, Mayor? There were 400 homicides. We were the murder capital of the world. That's not us. And that is not us right now. But how I feel when I go across the city and people are asking me about robberies, gunshots, and homicides, randomness, juveniles being harmed, I feel almost a greater anxiety than I did at that time. So what we are here to talk about is what ANC commissioners can do in neighborhoods, of course what you're hearing, but also what do you think can work to make our city safer. I've asked our experts at the table, and I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves momentarily. We'll go into our presentations, and we'll also be able to get through the agenda to hear from you about your questions. So with that, Kevin, if you would start with introductions.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Kevin Donahue. I'm the City Administrator.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Lindsay Apia. I'm the Acting Deputy Mayor for Public Safety and Justice.
Good morning, everyone. Robert Conti, Chief of Police.
Good morning, everyone. Is it working? Can you hear me? Yeah. Good morning, everyone. Linda Harley Harper, Director of Gun Violence Prevention.
Hi, good morning. Delano Hunter, Interim Director of the Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement and Director of Parks and Recreation.
And Tomas Talamante is in the back, and he is my Deputy Chief of Staff, and he and his team have set up our meeting and are going to help us also walk through some of the questions that if you're signed in, Tomas, I think you've already explained that, but if you've signed in, you can respond to some of the questions that we'll hear throughout, which is a great way. And not everybody here will be able to speak, but you can be heard through some of the questions that we'll ask throughout, which we think are very helpful.
So you've already answered 2 questions to warm up, and so now we're going to go into this form of communicating with you. And so we want to hear from you on how crime has impacted you personally. And so here you have the question: have you or someone you know personally been a victim of the following types of crime? Choose all that apply: homicide, killed, gun violence, or know someone who was shot, other violent crime, any crime, or none of the above. Yeah, so we can see that we have a large, or almost a third, of our fellow DC residents and neighbors who have been a victim of a violent crime. And so that is why we're here. We're talking about the state of crime in our city. And so this is the reality of where we are. We want to know how you feel, right? So how are you feeling, which is important to us as well. So the next question is a word cloud. We want you to type in, how are you feeling? Yeah, so we can see there's a whole host of varying ranges of feelings in the room. We have people who are concerned, who are frustrated. We have some who are hopeful. We have people who are worried, determined, and curious. We have neighbors and friends who are feeling nervous and anxious. So we're going to talk about that in ways that we can both hopefully uplift some of the hopeful, but also address the frustration, the current concern, and the anxiety, which is real. And so we know that one of the things that we root ourselves is in data. It's not everything, but certainly it tells the story of where we are. And so we're going to turn to our chief to do a review and to anchor us in the state of violent crime right now in the district.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I want to thank you all for being here, and I can tell you, just from a personal standpoint, as I look at all of the information that popped up on the screen, what people are feeling, I can tell you that I certainly share in a lot of those emotions, and I think I can speak for everyone that's up here, that those emotions are shared: the anger, the frustration, I saw some people feeling fine. I mean, you know, it's this range of emotions. But I'm going to get into the data and what the data tells us. But the data, I want you to keep this in mind, the data only tells part of the story. The data does not qualify how people feel, as you guys just mentioned, through the video here. Some people, when we talk about numbers and you talk about homicides, I don't think we can ever talk about an acceptable number of homicides. If it's one, that's one too many. And while we may be experiencing a downtrend, Any one homicide is one too many. So these numbers that I'm going to talk about is really just to kind of set the stage for the conversation, let you know what's accurate, what's out there. Sometimes, you know, when we hear things in the media and other places or various social media platforms, we don't know what the real numbers are. So we're going to take a walk through what the real numbers are in our city. So we ended the year, last year, 2022, with a 10% reduction in homicides, a 13% reduction in sexual assaults, assault with a dangerous weapon down by 17%. Robberies were slightly up by about 40 or so robberies, about 2%. Violent crime overall down 7%. When you hear that, that seems to go counter to, again, what people are actually feeling in our city right now. Let's move on to property crime. We talk about burglaries. Those are homes or businesses being broken into. Schools being broken into, a reduction of 10% there. Motor vehicle theft went up about 8%. This thing here lately with this online challenge with Kias and Genesis vehicles and Hyundais, we've started to see increases that have spilled over into the new year when we talk about motor vehicles that are being theft. In addition to that, how many of you have seen the food delivery guys just pulling up, leaving their cars running in, grabbing something, they come back out and their vehicle is gone, right? So all of those things in the motor vehicle theft space, theft from autos, cars are being broken into, other thefts that are occurring from stores and that kind of thing. And then the arsons. If you look at the overall crime in the District of Columbia, property crime by far is the leading entity where we have over 23,000 property crimes to occur, 3,830 violent crimes, and then you see the total there of 27,000 overall, all crimes combined, with a reduction of 4%. Again, this is just what the numbers say. It doesn't talk about how we feel. So we'll move a little further. A lot of times we talk about, you know, like the good old days and how things were, and, you know, I remember this and I remember that. Well, let's talk about what the overall crime trends have looked like in the District of Columbia. And again, this really gets into the space of what people are feeling. If you look at that blue line right there, that blue line goes back to 2015. And back in 2015, we were over 6,000 total violent crimes in our city. But if you look at this chart, every year, even up to this past year, 2022, the number of violent crimes have actually gone down to 3,830 violent crimes recorded. And then when you look at the property crime, the same thing with property crime, slight bumps. The bump there in 2020 for property crime is when we had the riots in the city, businesses were looted and all that kind of stuff. So that's where we saw a slight bump there. But with these crimes that have occurred in our city, again, the numbers don't speak to what people feel. Let's move over to gun-involved crimes and homicides. Another interesting data point, when you look at going back to 2015, when we had 162 homicides in 2015, 135 homicides in 2016, and in 2017, 116 homicides, and you look at those bar graphs there, those are crimes that were committed with guns in our city. And you look at 2015 and 2016, although the numbers were very high, when I look at the homicide numbers are low. Let me kind of explain that to you a little bit. So when you look at the homicide numbers, I look at the number of people that actually get shot. It's really a matter of marksmanship at the end of the day. A bullet to the left or a bullet to the right could be somebody losing their life. So in those years, whether it was urgent medical care, whether it was whatever it was, contributed to that number that we have there. But what you see has been consistent is that the number of crimes involving people using firearms, that number is way, way too high for a city our size. And it shows up on the street. It shows up in community. It shows up in schools. It shows up in the metro. It shows up if you're driving on 295 and you blow your horn at the wrong person. It shows up. Let's talk about the gunshot victims here is kind of what I was referring to. If you look at the number of fatal, I'll start with that top line there. So these are fatal fatalities that have occurred in the District of Columbia that have been the result of a gunshot. There are other fatalities, stabbings or strangulation or things like that that we see, but these are the numbers up to 2022 that involve someone who actually used a firearm. You look at the non-fatal. So in these instances of the non-fatal ones, obviously someone was shot, but they did not die. So going back to 2019, 557 people shot. It's a lot of people. You look at 2022, 710 people shot. Slight decrease from 2021, but go back to what I mentioned earlier, the difference of marksmanship. A bullet to the left, a bullet to the right could be the difference of a person losing their life. It just happened a couple of days ago. Benton Road, lady in a carryout, lost her life. Bullet to the left, bullet to the right. When you go down to the total gunshot victims, total gunshot victims, that next bar down there, it cuts across all of the total number of victims, including the fatalities. So as you can see in 2022, slight decrease. Total gunshot wound incidents, again, for that next one down, again, a slight decrease there.
And Chief, if I could just interrupt on this number, because we talked about the victims. These are people who actually were shot. But I also include in the victims the people who hear the shots, okay? Because I hear that from a number of people that they are hearing gunshots more and more and more. And so frequently, there are gunshots where there are no actual victims, where people were shot, and then there are all these times where we have seen an increase where residents and you, the ANC commissioners, are hearing from your constituents, I heard gunshots. What happened? I heard gunshots. So we also have to include, when we talk about how people are feeling about crime and feeling about their safety, they hear all these gunshots.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And that's a perfect segue to the next slide. Let's talk about the gunshots. Let's talk about what's showing up in the streets of the District of Columbia. You go back to 2021. I'll just start with 2021. And just, if you go with me for a minute here, just assume, and it's true, every year it has increased. The total number of firearms in 2021 that were recovered were 2,310. Privately made firearms, 439. Glock switches, that's 66. Those are switches that make semi-automatic firearms fully automatic. Go into 2022, and we talk about why or how people are impacted who just hear the shots. 3,152 guns recovered last year. That's over 800 more than what we recovered the previous year. Privately made firearms, look at that, 524. Glock switches, 127. What does it sound like? Going back to 2015, 2016, you heard pop, pop, pop in your community. They added Glock switches. Then you start hearing brrr in your community. More rounds being fired. The more opportunity it is for innocent people to be a victim of gun violence because of what we're seeing that's showing up in the streets of the District of Columbia. Some people ask, where are these guns coming from? Chief, same places. North Carolina, Virginia, Maryland, South Carolina, Georgia. We're seeing our trafficking cases increase as we work with ATF. But in addition to that, look at the privately made firearms. They're not even going to a gun store. People are having firearms shipped to locations where they're able to assemble them themselves. And then we wonder how 15 and 14 and 13-year-olds are out here with firearms on their person. You look at the guns recovered by month in the district. And let me tell you something. These guns that are recovered, they're not all Ward 8, Ward 7 guns. It's Ward 1, Ward 2, Ward 3, Ward 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. People driving into our city to patronize our nightclubs or our nighttime establishments along the Connecticut Avenue corridor, bringing guns into the District of Columbia. And we see it showing up time and time again. In the 2nd District, Over 200 illegal firearms recovered in the 2nd District. In my 30-some years of law enforcement, I've never seen this many guns in our city. The last one that I'll talk about, well, that stat over there to the right just really breaks it down by month in terms of what MPD recovered. I want to talk a little bit about our juveniles, our youth in our city. And this is something that I think certainly cuts to the heart of every resident of the District of Columbia when we start to see our babies involved in violence in our city. And how does that show up? What I'm starting to see, and have been for the last 2 years, and for those of you who watched press conferences and all this will not be new to you, what I'm about to say. Our babies are starting to show up different. They are showing up different. Our children are showing up, their first offense, their first introduction into the criminal justice system is for a violent crime where they're using a firearm. It's not showing up because they stole a bag of chips or because they broke into something. It's because they put a gun in somebody's face or they used that gun. And I look at the number of our young people involved in homicides. This past year, 10 young people arrested for homicide. Just this past year. The previous year, 9. The previous year before that, around 6. But the number is continuing to go up. Our kids, I can't tell you the number of kids that are showing up as victims when they get shot. They also are armed with firearms in our city. Time and time and time again, I'm standing over kids. I'm getting out of my bed, leaving my kids to go stand over a kid that's on the ground, and he got a gun on him. There's something that is troubling our communities, this culture of violence that is showing up, where violence is the only thing that's respected within the circles of our young people. It's showing up. It's showing up in schools. Ask the principals. They'll tell you. It's showing up in schools and they're scared. Kids are getting public safety transfers from this school to that school, only to run into similar issues. They're scared. Parents are scared. Everybody in this room, everybody's feeling this. When we look at the number of our young people, their first offense, their first introduction to the criminal justice system, 100 young people for robbery. I looked at a video yesterday, 2 days ago in a charter school where 3 young people took another young person's shoes off of them while they're in school and put the shoes in a trash can, and somebody else recorded it. Is something going on within the culture of our young people that's different now. When you look at the juvenile gunshot wound victims, that number every year, 2019, 2020, 2022, that number continues to go up. When we look at our juvenile arrests, now, we talked about this a few years ago. We want to see less kids in the system. We want to see less kids arrested. In the Metropolitan Police Department, we have tried, this government has tried to find alternatives for our youth as opposed to incarceration, looking at diversion as an option and so forth. So we have arrested less young people. But for the ones who have been arrested, the way that they're showing up, again, first offense, violent crime. That is something that we must acknowledge as we go forward and deal with this. The other thing that we must acknowledge when we talk about this is the staffing of the Metropolitan Police Department, historically, what that looks like. Now, I have not come across an ANC commissioner yet, and maybe there's one here, and if you're here, I'll be happy to talk to you afterwards, but I have not come across an ANC commissioner that said, hey, Chief, everything is great in my neighborhood, so you can take my resources and put them over there in this community because they need them a little bit more than us. I have not met that commissioner, but we got some new commissioners in here, so maybe that person is in here. But let's talk about the reality of what we're dealing with right now. You go back to fiscal year 99 when the Metropolitan Police Department, at its lowest point, 3,466 police officers, and you see what those numbers represent. And you look back in times, again, 2012, 2013, when we had 88 homicides and so forth. You look at those numbers and you look at where we are now. The lowest. 3,376 police officers. And I can tell you that the demand has not decreased. The demand, in fact, has increased. And every time there's a gunshot, you know what somebody say, Chief? We need presence. I don't have enough police officers to put on every block. I don't have enough police officers to put at every metro station. I don't have enough police officers to put on every corner. Our police officers have worked over 1 million hours of overtime for the last 3 years. And a lot of that has been forced overtime, not because they wanted to. I promise you that. People want to be home with their families and all that kind of stuff. But in order to ensure as best we can public safety in this city, we're going to work with the resources that we have right now. So when we talk about how we got here, it's not one thing that got us here. It's been a series of things that have happened in our city over the course of time that are showing up. And that has to be an acknowledgement.
Thank you, Chief, for that information. And I think it is especially good for us to acknowledge where we are in terms of historical trends. I'm really looking back that we have worked together as a city to drive down violent crime and crime in general. And we've done that over the course of many years and a lot of investment in communities, in policing, in schools, in recreation, you name it. Where we are having a significant issue is with crimes with guns. Gun crime, gun shots, gun victims, homicides. And you saw the slide. And so if I sound like a broken record when you hear me out in the community talking about guns, getting guns, having consequences for guns before the homicide happens, that is why. That in all of the strategies that we've used to drive down crime and violent crime in general, like down, you saw the graph, and you also saw the graph that showed the gun crime, gunshots, and homicide victims going up. So a concentration on guns, gun crimes, and people who will use guns in places where they're using guns has to be our strategy. So as we think about this, I think it's important to recognize all the things that we control, all the things that we don't control, and how fragile the public safety ecosystem is, and how much it has been disrupted in the last several years. This is a number, the chief mentioned it, it's 88. That's where we were in 2012 with homicides in the district, 88. 88 families disrupted, destroyed, traumatized. The number was 88. Last year, we were 203. This is what I know about this town, the size of town, when 203 homicides, somebody knows somebody impacted by that homicide. The degrees of separation from that homicide are very small. These are our fellow Washingtonians who we've lost to gun violence, just a few of them, because many of you have heard their stories. This is Davon McNeil, Sharnice Milton, and Vivian Morrow. Davon was killed near his home, just being at a barbecue. Sharnice Milton was a journalist in our city. Her homicide is unsolved. You will remember Micaiah, and Micaiah was also killed near her home. There were 11 people arrested and convicted for her murder. Nia Courtney was out on a corner at MLK and Malcolm X, and she was killed near her parents. What's the status of her case? Her case is closed. And Carmelo Duncan, he was in a car with his father that was sprayed with bullets. He was 1 year old. And that case is closed. So when we talk about all of the gun crime, sometimes we reduce, we can just think about numbers, and there are real people behind those numbers. And the other thing that we do, and you heard the chief say, oftentimes the so-called innocent victims get a lot of the attention. But there are a lot of young people who are involved in this circle of violence who are also victims of homicide. So we have to get to the people who are like this, our resident who was just at a carryout who was hit by a stray bullet, to the young person who frequently, as the chief said, we find also carrying a gun. So some things that I believe have contributed to kind of this real disruption in the public safety ecosystem just include, and you've heard me say this, disconnecting our kids from school because of COVID. None of us could have helped that. It happened, but it has had a real impact on how young people are connected to adults. And so that is why we pushed very hard to make sure our kids were the first in the region back to school. And we worked with all of our partners to get that done. The adults staying at home, not at work, not connected to their mental health professionals or their addiction treatment, or just being connected to their friends and family, checking in on each other, we know has contributed to a lot of the violence that we see. The chief and I described it, that people are just on edge, and some of that has been related to the isolation that we see. We had our city occupied for 4 years by somebody who was unpredictable, crazy, who fought against peaceful protest, who used our own police in our own military against the people of the district, also contributing to what we're feeling and the safety that we're feeling. We watched as a nation and the world a man murdered with George Floyd and the protests that followed, and all of that has contributed to feelings of, I believe, anxiety around public safety. It's also contributed to changes in policing and how people feel about policing, our ability to attract police and hire police, the amount of overtime that we spend, the amount of anxiety that our police feel. So all of these have affected our very fragile public safety ecosystem. We watched our officers have to go to the Capitol to assist the United States Capitol Police, where, again, there was a big kind of federal-local divide. There was a black and white divide. There was a left and right divide. And our officers, again, were traumatized in that. We've had great leadership at the police department, and we have seen changes not just among the chiefs, but among the commanders, among the lieutenants. And the chief has also talked about how we have seen fewer officers. We've seen a lot of attrition. I was looking at that number when I was elected, we had 4,000 officers in 2007. And when I reflect back on some of the corridors that I was responsible for, like Kennedy Street and like Riggs Park, I believe, I'm just one person, that presence and that attention made a difference on those streets. And when I look at them now, I'm wondering what happened. So that's part of the story. Now, we also, in this time period, have embraced alternatives to policing and have funded those alternatives. And we're going to hear a little bit about some of the work that we have done in creating the Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement, creating an Office for Gun Violence Prevention, and hiring people that are working as violence interrupters in that space. We've also hired more DC residents and have reinvigorated the MPD cadet program that produced Chief Conti. And by doing that, we're also able to hire more DC residents, more women to work on our force. And so we're very proud of the work that we're doing there. We've also had some policy changes that I believe affect the ecosystem that I already mentioned are fragile, and there are many. I'll mention a couple here. We had 2 budget cycles where we could not hire police. where our budget for hiring was slashed, and that was a decision made at the budget, in the budget process, not separately, but in the budget process to slash funding for police. We've also we're in a period now where we are being forced to take our SROs out of the school buildings. So that we believe, and the principals believe, is having an impact on safety there. We have had, because of COVID, I think largely a slowdown in some of our court processes once the police make an arrest. How fast are those cases being adjudicated through the process? Impacted by COVID, but also impacted by the ability of the courts to be fully staffed. So those are also some of the things. You know that I have differed with the council on a lot of public safety issues, but the two that I have vetoed involved fare evasion and the decriminalization of fare evasion, and the most recent Criminal Justice Revision Act. So I wanted to kind of put in context when I say that the public safety ecosystem in the district is fragile and it has been disrupted in the last several years. There are a lot of factors that involve that, some of which we control, the people at this table, some of which we don't, but we still have to manage it, anticipate it, and deal with it. The same is true for you. Some of which you control, which is how you engage your residents and talk to your residents and respond to your residents. But I also want you to be armed with the information that we have. And so over the course, and you have all of the data, that's where we end up. So there are frequent ways that I ask you to help us, and that is being eyes and ears, of course. It's engaging in the budget process, and it's engaging in the policy process, and making sure that residents know all of the programs and services that apply to them. So I think this is where we're going to ask you for some more information. And Tomas, are you up? Who's up? Linda? Linda's up? Yeah.
Good morning. I want to thank all of you for deciding to spend your Saturday morning with us to talk about this important topic. And we certainly consider each and every one of you as partners with us as we are working in the city to combat the crime that we're all seeing and feeling. I think, I want to say that I look at ANC commissioners as credible messengers. You're in our communities, you're stakeholders, and you are considered credible by your neighbors. And so you are absolutely partners with us as we go through the process of figuring out what we need to do in our communities to make them work. And I want to echo what the mayor said and just challenge all of us to really take time to share and learn about the resources that we have in the city. It's probably the #1 comment that I get as I go to a lot of community meetings. It is, they need resources. I hear that so much. But we also need help to get the people to resources, and we need help to get the residents to realize that the resources are there for them. And sometimes they also need a warm hand of someone who knows them to help them to get to the resources. And so as the eyes and ears of our community, we are looking to partner with you as we go through turning around what is going on in our city right now. I want to bring your attention to the question. I see that folks have already started responding. But who do you view as a partner with you in helping you to respond or prevent crime in your community? And you can select as many as apply. So we want to know who you are looking to and consider a partner in preventing crime in your community.
And for clarity, it's MPD and violence interrupters. So just.
Okay, we'll give one more second. It looks like votes are still coming in. The good news is that everyone listed is considered a partner by someone in here, so folks are partnering, which is a great sign. And MPD and our violence interrupters seem to be the number one partners, as well as our community leaders that are in our communities.
And Linda, this is Kevin Donahue. Hello, everyone. So my look at the graph, and I think it's always equaling about 100%. So normally, an all that apply, like the one that you answered about 30 minutes ago, would sort of add up well over 100%. So you should think of this as what was the most frequently voted for item. So it says 14% MPD or violence interrupters. Likely, most of the room probably labeled that because the graph is always equaling about 100%. So think of it as like what's the most frequently commented or relied upon resource.
And I think, Kevin, we must acknowledge a mistake in loading this, that it was meant to be MPD on one line and violence interrupters on the next line. So if we have time before we close out, we'll ask the question again.
Yes, and just to further clarify, the violence interrupters are actually with the Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement, not with MPD. We all work together, but they are with the Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement. So I want to talk a little bit about the non-law enforcement approaches to crime that we have and the investments that the mayor has made in our gun violence prevention strategies and our intervention strategies. This year, we are spending over $115 million on violence intervention and prevention programs. And so that goes back to my point about it's important for us all to know what those programs are so that we can share with them with our neighbors and we can know what the resources are. I won't read this whole slide to you, but what I will do is highlight some of the big ones. Our hospital-based violence intervention program is a grant that is managed by the Office of Victim Services and Justice Grants, $2.3 million. So all of our main hospitals have credible messengers in the hospital. It's an evidence-based practice across the country that allows gunshot victims to be partnered with a credible messenger who works with them while they are in the hospital. And it's an evidence-based practice that oftentimes when gunshot victims are in the hospital, they actually are at a vulnerable point where they're willing to accept help and support and be able to talk about their life and make a decision about doing things differently. And so that's what the credible messengers that are in our hospital-based program do. I also want to highlight the credible messengers that are housed at DYRS, a total of $5 million. The credible messengers are partnered with all of the young people who are committed to DYRS. And so those who are in the deepest end of the juvenile justice system find themselves committed to DYRS, and they all are partnered with their own credible messenger. I also wanted to highlight the community capacity the violence intervention certificate with the University of the District of Columbia. So this is a program that has been funded to invest in our credible messengers and our violence interrupters to offer them additional training and to pour into them so that they can continue to be good at what they do. And so a lot of them come to us with innate caring and compassion for the community, a knowledge base, but they also, we all benefit from additional training. And so UDC has created a certificate program that is for the violence interrupters. And that program for this fiscal year has a total of $0.9 million of investment. And so with that, I just want to say this slide highlights the different programs that add up to the $115 million. A lot of the funding is going to additional staffing that makes up the ecosystem that the mayor was referencing earlier. The Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement has 95 violence interrupters, as well as the other Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement programs have 28 additional staff that are assigned, which also I want to highlight that they have the Leadership Academy that has violence interrupters actually in the schools, and the Pathways program, which is an amazing transformational program that has taken those who have been perpetrators of gun violence in our communities and is a transformational mentoring program that works to transform and help persons to turn their lives around and to get employment at the end of the program. DYRS has 75 total credible messengers, and I referenced them earlier. At DPR, we have 46 roving leaders who are community stakeholders, who know our communities, who work in our rec centers, who know our young people and who know our families and are working every day to prevent gun violence. And we have the urban park rangers, 19 of persons who are hired by also under DPR as urban park rangers. So I wanted to just give an overview of the staffing and the resources that are available. And I'm going to turn it back over to Lindsay.
Yeah, and so we'll provide you with all of this information. You saw resource tables outside, and we also have ward by ward resource sheets for you with a lot of the contact information for the agencies and otherwise. We want you to feel empowered with information and resources for your residents, but we don't want you to feel overwhelmed in trying to get all of this information right now. This is a conversation opener, but we saw that so many of you, which is fantastic, are new ANC commissioners, which we love and appreciate you stepping into that role in serving community. And so we will arm you with resources. And so this is a conversation, and it's important to us. The mayor often says that in our city, we can do anything if we do it together. And so we're in this space because it's a conversation about how we can work together to do that. And a conversation is two-way. And so to get started, as the mayor said, there'll be time for many of you to speak. But we wanted to hear from some of your fellow commissioners who really have worked alongside us and partnered with us to help serve our residents that are in their SMDs. And so I'm going to ask Commissioner Brooks, and then we'll have Commissioner Martin. And so if you can say your SMD, if you can raise your hand, they have a mic for you, to share about your experience and how you work with us. And so here and here. Yep.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
My name is Allison Brooks, and I'm the ANC Commissioner for ANC 4B, and I also chair the 4B Commission. I've been a commissioner now for my third term. I'm starting my third term, so I guess I'm starting my fifth year. And I'm a lifelong Washingtonian. I'm a mother, and now I'm an ANC Commissioner. And so I prioritize things in that order because I love my city, and I love my kids, and I want to give back in a way that is substantial. Right? So to that end, unfortunately, on the very first day of my term, my first term, there was a violent crime in my single-member district. And so from day one, I had to learn to begin to work with the Office of Public Safety and Justice as well as the ONE's office. And so they've been very supportive of our commission, of our neighborhoods, and would actually love to see them as a part of the options that we have in the survey as ways that we work to improve our neighborhoods, right? So we are trying to meet people where they are. So Jasmine Banab, who's amazing, I don't think she ever sleeps, has helped plan public safety meetings, has helped plan job fairs, has helped people get birth certificates and social security cards so they can go out and get employed. And so The goal to me today is to work collaboratively, because the chief was correct when we all state that we didn't get here from one specific thing, and there isn't one magic bullet that's going to get us out of this situation. So the collaboration with agencies, with MOKers, with every agency in the city is what is going to really help us improve the condition that we find ourselves in now. So thank you for offering this forum and empowering us with at least information that we can take back to residents in ways that we can continue to improve our SMDs.
Thank you, Commissioner. So you can see the question is reloaded now, and so separately MPD and violence interrupters. And we want to acknowledge as well that in the violence interruption space, our partners in CURE, who we know that in some of your SMDs, Cure the Streets are your VIs. And so we know Lauren Haggerty is here from Attorney General Schwab's office, and so we certainly want to acknowledge the partnership. Where are you, Lauren? There she is. That's Lauren Haggerty, the Chief of Staff for Attorney General Schwab. So, okay, and so now we'll hear from Commissioner Martin.
I'm sorry. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Kimberly Martin. My SMD is 7C08. I was just recently redistricted from 7E07. It is the southeast side of the Capitol Gateway community, so off East Capitol Street, you know, the drag racing area. I think collaboration is important. As Allison mentioned, Deputy Mayor of Public Safety and Justice Office, they were very instrumental when I was the chair of the 7E Public Safety Committee, bringing resources to different areas. I know that we have, you know, there are a lot of things we have in our city, right? There are a lot of resources that are available, but getting them to the people is another story. And that's where the disconnect comes in. I know we are ANC commissioners, but the agencies have to understand we are people too. We have lives. You know, I have a staff of 7 people at my job that pays me, and, you know, and this one does not. So I have to do certain things when I can, but not always, you know what I'm saying? So when you have these events, when they pop up, you know, which may be very well be useful. There was a vision board about financial literacy. That is needed in my neighborhood. They just had that the other day. Guess when I found out about it? Hours before it happened. So not helpful, because I cannot share that information with people within that time. Because guess what? I was in meetings at work all day. So by the time I get home at night to check my ANC emails to send it out to people, like I said, it's not helpful. So we need to work better at communication and planning what we're going to do, you know, planning around the budget, you know, putting different programs and stuff in place to combat this violence, public safety issues, I don't know, a myriad of things. I can't really sum them all down to one right now, but, you know, I'm always open. Like I said, my SMD is 7C08. Email me, call me, holler at me today. Listen, if we can all work together, I'm with it. And that's it.
Okay, so we've gotten to the point in our program where we want to call on you if you have questions, but also if you have some specific solutions. So I think part of my reason for wanting to gather us all is that no person, not us in the agencies or you in the audience, has the one perfect solution. So we want to figure out together what's working. And in some cases, you may think that we're doing some things that just aren't working and we need to stop and do something else. So if there's some solutions out there, we want to hear them. So I'm going to start back here. Hand back there.
Good morning. I'm Commissioner Barbara Clark in 8A, and I'm trying to figure out why is it that when we call some of these agencies, we get a recording and nobody responds. And it's just not fair to the public that you have to keep on, and then you wind up going out doing things yourself. And we don't have guns. We don't have anything to protect us. I had a gun drawn on me, and I'm still nervous about it. And usually everywhere I go, my son takes me and brings me, you know. But the point of it is that we need to get our agencies back to work and back to helping us. We're out here by ourselves, seemingly, because nobody calls back. We'll return your call within 24 hours or 48 hours, and then you get nothing. People are complaining about, in apartment buildings, about people smoking and things happening, being threatened, and whatever. You tell them to call the police, okay, but by the time the police get there, person's gone. So we need people to be out and working with the community.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner, for that. So I think the point I heard was the agencies need to be working. The agencies need to be calling people back. But then I also heard something that I think is an opportunity for ANC commissioners to help us. And how we are, for example, in buildings, helping to support norms in the buildings where people live. So if there's a lot of smoking in your building, there shouldn't be smoking in your building. The question I would ask was, what role can ANCs help with in supporting and amplifying the norms for that building? That's just a suggestion. And I want to be clear that DC government is working, and we were among the first employers to go back in the office now since June of 21. Since June of 21. But if we are not responding to calls, commissioners, that is something that I need to know. All right? And we will come up with a way that you can tell us if you're not getting the responses that you need from agencies. Just about all of, and you can, I'll let you know when I'm coming back to another question. Just about every agency, especially the big ones, I'll go back to that question. DPW.gov, like they are some of our biggest agencies that get calls, have outreach staff whose responsibility it is to work with you. But it is also their responsibility to support the systems that we have in place that make it more efficient to get the work done that you need and to be responsive. So we want to make sure that you're getting your calls back, but also that you're engaging the systems that work most efficiently to get your sidewalk repaired or to get bulk trash picked up. And so we want to continue to work with you on that too. So the note that I have right now is that at least one ANC commissioner thinks that DC government officials are not at work or that they're not responding to calls. Okay, I'm going to go on this side this time. Let me go to this front table.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Patience Singleton. I am an ANC commissioner for 4A04 and the chair of 4A. I live up near, I live in Brightwood, up near the Walter Reed complex. My question is, I want to thank everyone for being here and for the mayor for hosting this. I believe in a multifaceted solutions to crime. I think that we need more police on the street, but I also think that we need more recreation facilities for our kids. And this is my question for the mayor and for DPR. I understand we learned in December that they closed the youth center at Fort Stevens Recreation Center and reassigned our staff to Shepherd Park. We have no youth services in Brightwood for the 2,000 children. Many of them are at risk and they're children of immigrants. So I want to know what DPR is going to do to reopen the youth center at Fort Stevens to make sure that children who are at risk have opportunities to have wholesome or productive recreation facilities.
Got it. So I did ask Delano to be prepared to talk about recreation. In almost every meeting we go to, there's a question about recreation. It's usually put this way: there's nothing for kids to do. And so, sorry, say again. Okay, so we're going. Let's talk about that. All right, let's talk about it. And so if we need to go through everything, we have some beautiful buildings. Everybody lives less than 1 mile away from one of them. One of our facilities, a community center, a pool, a playground. And so how are we programming those facilities so that the young people want to be there, the seniors want to be there, you name it. We want everybody to be able to take advantage of those programs. In addition to that, we have programs at our schools. And so we want to make sure our kids are taking advantage of that. In addition, we've added so many thousand more slots for summer recreation opportunities. And I think we have some ideas about how we're getting more young people engaged in those activities as well. This is my feeling, that there is a disconnect between what we're offering and what people are taking advantage of. And it may be that it's not what the young people want. It may be like, and Delana, I'm gonna ask you to talk about Fort Stevens. I wasn't aware about any change there. In some, one thing that some of our young people tell us is when they walk in the recreation center, they don't think it's for them. And I get a lot of people, especially Councilmember Trayon White, will tell me about the Boys and Girls Clubs and harken back to those days because the facilities were just for them. There were no seniors in those facilities. And so I think that I am open to having a full-on discussion about our programming and how we talk about our programming so that we don't have these beautiful buildings that the young people don't think are for them. But at the same time, we have to have facilities for our seniors, which is also a big population in our city that suffers from isolation. So we need to be able, and we can, use our facilities and maximize the use of our facilities so that everybody can enjoy them. So Delano, if you would talk, and I think we also, we put up some examples on the screen ward by ward of where the facilities are, but I think a bigger discussion is how we're using them for programming.
Sure. Thanks again, Mayor Bowser. Again, good afternoon. Name is Delano Hunter, and proud to serve as the Director of Parks and Recreation. And I'll be the first to admit, we want to do more. If I had my druthers, centers would be open 24 hours. I'm proud of my colleagues. We were amongst the only agencies to engage persons during the thick of the pandemic. We've kept centers open 24 hours a day. We've engaged teens in non-traditional ways, but the question is always, how do you go about doing more? And I'm thankful for the mayor's support because we're able to get back to some of the core things that we were able to do pre-pandemic. You mentioned some of the sites. We've just lost employees who have passed away, who have retired. And we were down nearly 160 employees. But because of some of the investments we have been able to rehire, we've made almost 100 new hires since October. I'm proud to announce that at the end of February, many of our sites like Deanwood will be back open at 83 hours, 6 a.m. to 9 p.m., Monday through Friday, and 9 to 5 on a Saturday. So we'll get back to 83 hours of service. And also as it relates to programming, it's not just enough to keep the centers open, but you have to have dynamic program. I can tell you now that for school-age kids, between October to present, there are about 9,600 opportunities, including at places like Deanwood. Every aquatics class is full. The Esports Academy, full. Basketball, fully subscribed. 1,800 kids that are playing basketball in our gyms right now on a Saturday. But the question is, can you do more? I'm a district native. I take that to heart. I know what it means to be a part of our public schools, to be a part of our recreation centers, and how vital that is. So we're certainly committed to doing more and offering more, and sooner rather than later. So that would be, if you have any suggestions, we're certainly willing to hear those out and implement those. Yes, and Fort Stevens is one of those sites that will open at the end of February. Many of those sites, again, most sites our larger sites, such as Deanwood, will go back to an 83-hour operation. Some of our intermediate sites, let's say like a Hillcrest, those will go back to 68 hours of operations. And even our smaller sites like a Petworth, which have been reduced to about 5 hours, they'll go back to a full 8-hour schedule. We've been able to do that, again, by making 100 new hires just in the last 90 days.
I think what would be helpful, Delano, is if we have in our kind of follow-up with the ANCs, we can list out like status quo hours and the hours we're trying to get to and estimate by when. So we can report that out to you so you're aware of that. Let me go in the back in the middle. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mayor. Mike Velasquez from 6A02. I represent the central part of 8th Street Northeast District. And I'd like to salute you and the members of your administration for being here. You asked for some suggestions, and there was a youth 15 years old recently killed in Northeast Washington, D.C. And the perpetrators were arrested, so I appreciate MPD prosecuting that, but it was tied to a vehicle that had a record of excessive speed in Washington, D.C. More and more we find excessive speed being connected to violent crimes. So I'd like to ask you to focus on temporary tags and excessive speed in the District of Columbia. Specifically, make sure that MPD is trained, empowered, and engaged to intercede these vehicles, that you have a unit that goes around and finds these cars that are guilty of repeated excessive speed, and that you increase funding for the Department of Public Works to boot and tow these cars. And as you get these cars, you will find they're connected to repeat offenders and to youth who are stealing these cars. Thank you.
Thank you. So we have had some work around the temporary tags, and I also kind of want to put this in remember I talked about the infrastructure and the complicated job that the police have, and prioritizing violent gun offenders, not chasing vehicles, but not targeting but dealing with the problem that we have. And we have prioritized this tag issue. I'm not remembering it exactly, so I'm going to ask the city administrator to respond.
Thank you for raising that. So there's been many unexpected trends out of COVID. One nationally is the proliferation of temporary tags. Actually, they're often fraudulent tags. So there's temporary tags that everyone gets when they get a new car or a new used car. They have to make it a permanent tag. You sometimes see that they're dated back 1 or 2 years. Then when we look at the tag itself, often it doesn't match the car itself. So those temporary tags is often a cover for fraudulent tags that someone does, in fact, to your point, use often because they want to commit a crime and they don't want their tag to be registered to the car that they are driving. So it is a priority. We actually have recently expanded our ability to tow cars, which was a limiting factor in being able to crack down as much as the issue calls for. So we've been able to expand the lots that we can take cars to, which was loosening up that factor that lets us be more aggressive. And this is not going after tags that people have that are legitimate and temporary, that they have for 30 days and maybe now it's day 45 or day 60. These are tags in which we look at the tag itself, it doesn't match the car, and we know there's something else going on, and that'll be the priority. So thank you for raising it.
Okay. All right, I'm going to go back 2 over here, and then 2 over here. Okay? Yep.
Hello? Okay, great. So, Commissioner Bill 8C08. So I have 2 things. One is a comment and the other is a possible solution. My first comment is thank you to the mayor and leadership in the government for continuing to invest in our violence interrupters. I know there's a lot of harsh criticism about violence. Huh?
A little louder.
Yeah.
It's on.
Okay,
Hello? Okay.
Sure
Ooh, sorry. So I was saying to thank you for the continued investment in our violence interruption programs out of the ONCE office and the Attorney General's office. There's a lot of harsh criticism from violence interrupters for people who don't quite understand the model. But what I want to say is the people on the panel, the people in this room, the people in PD do not have access to the spaces in the streets that the violence interrupters have. We cannot walk up to a gangster, we can't walk up to a shooter and say, hey, can you not retaliate? And so when Chief Conte said that 1 homicide is too much, when they're able to prevent a retaliation, that is effective. So please continue to invest in the violence interruption programs. My second thing is the preventative measures. I shared this in a CAC meeting this week, but as we know, children are touching they start to enter crew life around 11 and 12. And so if children are picking up their first gun at 12, whether they're just holding the clip or holding the bullets for their big brother, what are we doing on the elementary school level to prevent that trajectory? All hands on deck should be in DCPS. We can't control what happens at home and when they leave the schools, but can we put a permanent restorative justice program in place? When I was at Wilson, we had peer mediation. What are we doing to help these children so that when they get to middle school, they don't even want to touch a gun? And to the Rex, I'm a former DC teen. My children are teens now. I'm sorry, but more Recs don't stop gun violence. These children are not children of the 90s. They don't want to be in a rec no more. That's why they're not going. So what do we want to do to focus on their mentality and what helps their culture?
So what do you think that is? I tend to agree with you because I can go down a number of streets in DC that are problematic, and we will be blocks from a recreation center. So tell me, like, what's your impression of how we get that disconnected and maybe violent young person connected?
Honestly, I think that's the questions that we should ask the teens. Like, we got to talk to them. Like my teenager, for example, I live in Douglas, Congress Heights. I have to pick up my son for the metro. He don't want to walk home up and down Alabama Avenue. He wants to be out, like, hang with his friends, but it's not safe for him. So I think we really need to talk to the teens in the areas it's affected to see what they want. But we can't keep pushing this rec stuff. It's not 1999.
I got it. That's just one opinion. I agree with that one. I agree that we have to do more rec, but that's not necessarily touching the kids we're most concerned about. Let me put it that way. And when I say kids, I don't just mean below 18. So let me say there was another one back here. Okay, yep.
Hi, my name
I'm
is
gonna come to the front.
Clark Weigel. I represent Commission 4D07. I also work in the central office for our public schools. And something that's always puzzled me for about 7 years of employment there is, why doesn't DC offer a modified diploma? We offer a full diploma where you get all 25 Carnegie units, do the whole thing, and we'll support you with an IEP to get there. I work in special education. Or we'll give you an IEP certificate. There is no middle ground to support our students who, if you look at, I'm sure, the records of violent offenders, they also needed support in schools with academics, social, emotional, behavioral goals, etc. It's documented they need support. We're not giving them an appropriate exit if we don't provide a modified diploma like all the surrounding federal zones of Virginia, Maryland, Delaware, you name it. So they don't have a viable step. They don't have that leap to adulthood that other zones offer.
So you're saying that's a credential that's equivalent to a high school diploma?
Yeah, exactly. And
Okay.
it's backed by the state Board of Education or
Okay.
whatever, right? Or OSSI in our case. But you get a high school diploma and then you can get in-state tuition around the country, and that's great. It is hard to get a high school diploma in DC. And we're not supporting the people who need the most support, that are struggling. You know, we're not supporting our students in self-contained programs. We're not giving them pathways back to least restrictive environments.
Got it.
Okay.
So I know that do we have public schools? Okay.
Hi, folks. My name is Michelle Yan. I'm Chief of Staff at the Deputy Mayor for Education's office. I think one thing that we're speaking to here is also graduation requirements for students, which is managed by the Office of the State Superintendent for Education. Looking at our graduation requirements and how it compares to other jurisdictions and the thresholds that we're holding students to is absolutely something that we're looking at. So I do appreciate the comment, particularly as we think about our students with disabilities and our students who have IEPs, as we're supporting them into their careers, into adulthood, making sure they have pathways to employment.
Yes, and I also don't want us to forget the work that we're doing at the high school level, the reimagining high schools, creating advanced technical centers, creating dual enrollment programs, and creating opportunities where students can go to school and work and get work experience right now. So we do recognize that the 4-year degree in how we are catching students up who need to be caught up could be a different pathway. So we note your comment. I have 2 over here, and then I'm coming to this front row. Hold on. Give me a minute. Go ahead.
Good morning. Good morning. My name is...
Just go, Paul. Go.
Good morning. My name is Paul Trantham, ANC 8B. I want to welcome my entire board from 8B for coming out. I want to just say thank you to Conti for your work you've been doing in the community throughout the whole city. I've seen under your leadership where we've seen more arrests, more convictions of individual violence. My suggestion to you and the mayor is that, one, because of so many people, which you was right about, they come into our city and disrespect our city, put polices at all of the exits. They go out of our city. That way, through communication on the radio, you can say, okay, look out for this car that's coming, because they're running out of D.C., going into Waldorf, going into Prince George's County, and then it can also combat the problem of these ATVs. Y'all can inform the police that where these ATVs are coming from Temple Hill, Fort Washington, and all that. Secondly, I've learned that you do have plain clothes. I've been adamant about plain clothes. You do have plain clothes out here on the street. I would ask that you put them out here, Mayor, standardly throughout the city, especially over here in Ward 8. It would combat the homelessness. It would combat the loitering. It would combat the sex trafficking. It would combat these guns. We'll learn how they're getting into our city, into the hands of these youth. It's nothing against the mayor. I'm just giving you a solution to the problems that is troubling our communities right now.
I got it. So you more undercover work.
More plain clothing.
All right, plain clothes. But let me ask the chief to kind of talk about some of the units, the various units that are at work at MPD right now.
Thank you for your comments, Commissioner. There are a couple of things in that space. One, we have had to look at how we best utilize the resource that we have by really working closer with our federal partners, and I want to highlight that because a lot of the success that we saw last year was in large part contributed to the partnerships that we have leveraged with federal agencies, FBI, DEA. They're working with us on a number of cases in Ward 8, specifically in Ward 8. Those gas stations over there, along South Capitol Street. I mean, so a lot of partnerships, a lot of partnerships in that space. You know, we have to make sure that we have a balance of police officers who are in plain clothes, but also police officers who are available for calls for service. People are calling us for everything that you can think of. The guy that's in the hallway smoking the weed, somebody's messing around my car, the neighbor's too loud, my kid is missing, all of these things. So we have this defined resource of police officers, and, you know, while we can, you know, have police officers do this, this, and that, some of the things that you mentioned, I can tell you, police officers are not going to resolve the issue of homelessness. They're not going to resolve the issue of loitering. Right? Our presence in communities, certainly we want our police officers to be there in partnership with community members. We were doing a walk down there in Ward 8, it was the 16th and W, I guess it was. A lot of loitering going on. And our police officers and government officials were standing right there, and guess what? Not a soul moved from that block. You hear what I'm telling you? But what I'm saying to you, Commissioner, is this. Like, we're going to deploy our resources best we can to focus on violent crime and look for those opportunities to expand in the plainclothes space. It's not the cure-all. It really is not the cure-all, but it does help us to be more effective when it comes to recovering guns. It does help us to be more effective when it comes to taking the right violent people off the street, man. So I hear you. I'll take that, and we'll take that back to the team, and we'll work on that, sir. Yeah, go ahead.
What I'm
I think we're represented by all wards of the city. It's everywhere, man. It's everywhere. I got what you say. I got what you're saying, Commissioner.
So 2 questions here and 2 questions from this table. Yes. And I want to acknowledge our former council member for Ward 5, Harry Thomas.
Thanks. I'm Commissioner 5C06, but one of the things I want to ask about, and this speaks to what you were saying, Chief, is solutions. So we had the Edward Brin Memorial Grant Fund for Justice, and those are federal dollars that come in. Can you give us an outline on how you're applying those dollars? Because they would support our violence interrupters and other things, and what that budget would be around that. Because I think one of the issues is always money and resources, and our federal partners got to do a little better in getting you resources. Can you talk a little bit about that, or Deputy Mayor, can you tell us a little bit about that and how we can utilize those dollars in our community?
Yeah, actually, I'll start, and Director Harley Harper will finish. So one of the exciting things about federal resources recently is when there's the American Recovery Act dollars that every city and state got, including the district, they actually specifically mentioned violence interruption and prevention as an allowable use of federal funds. So when we put together the mayor's budget 2 years ago, using the first year in which we had that funding, we were able to expand dramatically the investment we were having on people in community that work for organizations doing violence prevention work. And then because we know we have to sustain that over time, and federal money typically lasts about 2 or 3 years, we put in the back end of our budget, so in years 2024 and 25, local money that would be able to sustain that investment that got started with federal. But that was, I think, the first time in my years in government I can remember federal dollars specifically calling out and allowing for that kind of creative solutions work.
Buenos dias, Alcaldesa. How are you? My name is Salvador Saucedo Guzman. I'm a commissioner in ANC 5D. I'm also the chair of ANC 5D, which encompasses all of South Ward 5. My neighborhood is the neighborhood of Trinidad. You mentioned some of the stuff that's been kind of happening over the last decade that's been kind of getting us to this point. From what I see, our city's going through a real depression. Our youth particularly have been feeling different ways in our youth, sometimes due to the lack of certain services that are consistent within our neighborhoods, it just makes situations worse. They see trash in our sidewalks, they see bullet hole-ridden vehicles on our blocks. Those kind of things, when you see them, it does drive you a certain type of way, especially when you have new developments coming in with fresh homes that they feel like they'll never have access to. I talk about prevention, and I work a lot to really focus on prevention. Yes, MPD, you guys are very involved on the aftermath of all situations, but I want to get to the root of how we can just stop this altogether. One of the things that's working in our neighborhoods, which I would love to see you, Mayor, invest in something different. It might come off a little radical, but being that I'm part of the melanin community, that word ties to us in terms of our improvement in life. We should be really focusing on why our youth are doing the things that they're doing, and a lot of it is aggression. We should be transferring that aggression into something else. A community member who's a returning citizen in Trinidad, he provides gloves instead of guns to our youth. We should be probably focusing on having DPR invest in some of these spaces that they can't provide to be able to teach boxing, for example. It's easier to break up a fight than to stop a bullet once it's been shot. And I think if we're able to engage youth that way, speak to them directly, and teach them more discipline. We had a commissioner over here saying that they don't respect police officers. There's a lot of disrespect in the city. We need to find different ways where we can teach our next generation of professionals and leaders in this city to really learn how to learn respect, discipline. And I think boxing is just a great avenue to do that. So I would love to see you as a mayor of this beautiful city to invest in something like that for our youth, because I think it could really make a difference.
Okay, that's fantastic. Do you want to talk about our boxing programs?
No, I agree with you wholeheartedly. I'm proud. We probably have the best public boxing program in the United States, and that's no lie. And I think that there are a lot of other providers that have indicated they want support. I'm really proud that by January 31st, we're announcing a round of funding for what we call core recreation, and it's actually for non-government recreation providers who historically have competed sometimes for funding for STEM and after school. No, this is for pure recreation. I know the gentleman you're talking about on Mount Olivet Road, like this was created with folks like him in mind. So I'll ensure that all ANCs get it, and we want those providers that are non-government to have access to supports for recreation. So I'm excited about that.
I'd also say in our achievement centers, which are two of our DYRS centers, which we work with some of the young people in the deepest end of the juvenile justice system. So we know what helps to uplift our young people to a place where they don't find themselves reoffending in situations. And so one of the things that we're working on is expanding our reach of that type of programming that we know that's transformative for our young people, so that more of our young people who don't find their way all the way to the deep end of the juvenile justice system are able to access those type of wraparound services, supports, programming in safe spaces that we know through research, through evidence, and through practice in our own city really work in keeping them and helping them to be on a more positive path. So between DPR and DYRS, we're working on it.
Okay, so we're going to take 3 more questions. I want you to get prepared for what comes after those 3 questions. I'm going to ask you to think about the one thing you want me to follow up on leaving this meeting as a speed round. And I'll go around the room. It can't be a long statement. It can't even be a long sentence. It could be the one thing you want us to focus on. So I'm going to take the last 3 questions and then get ready for the one thing. So 1, 2, 3.
Not allowed to hold the mic. Hi, Mayor. Thank you for coming. Thank you, Chief Conti, for coming. Jamie Sycamore, 1B03, Cardozo neighborhood. I just wanted to do a couple quick things. One, now that the council has overridden your veto, what can we do to help support you to try to get this something to happen that's not there, that does not involve Congress? As a caveat, we do not want to involve Congress, but what can we do as residents to help push back against that? Number 2, Mr. Conti, I'm curious about the numbers on here. It's talking about gun violence and things like that, but it seems like it's only guns that are discharged. What about the guns that are being brandished in the middle of a crime? So like just last week, I saw someone at gunpoint, their jacket and their wallet got stolen and took off. It was right in front of my house. Is there any sort of numbers in that? And number 2, my recommendation as far as commission, my whole commission encompasses most of U Street and a large part of 14th Street. I would love to see the DC Nightlife Task Force come back permanently during the weekends. I'm not sure if it's implemented, but I'm sure yeah. Thank you.
All right. So big question on what can we do policy-wise at the council given this recent law rewrite that was done. I know most of you have probably been following it. The criminal code was updated. It was a needed update, but in my view, there were extraneous things that were added to it that should have been a part. And there were weakening of penalties that should not happen. That's my opinion. That's why I vetoed it. I've issued very few vetoes in the last 8 years, but I'm going to veto it if I think it makes the district less safe. I've heard the argument that, oh, don't worry about it because it's not going to be implemented for 3 more years, where I'm going to be worried about carjackings and homicides in 3 years too. But more than that, I'm going to be focused on victims, people who have lost families, making sure that there's justice for them. So that's kind of how it goes in the legislative process, right? And so now the next part of the process that I've already announced is that we're going to be working with the chair of the Public Safety and Justice Committee on amendments to the criminal code rewrite that they have done that address our concerns, and not just ours sitting here, the United States Attorney, the judges, both chief judges for the Court of Appeals and the Superior Court. And I'm hopeful that we will, like we did for a good part of the code, get some consensus around those controversial items. So that's it. I'm told that the chief did not mention a few of the task forces that he has put together that's contributing to reductions in crime in our entertainment areas like U Street, Connecticut Avenue, and also Minnesota and Benning. So those continue to be in place. You ask what you can do. We will do a better job of letting you know when we have policy concerns. And public safety policy concerns, people will say, Mayor, why'd you let that happen? And we are a part of the process, but there are hearings beforehand. There are opportunities for you to communicate directly with your council members about your policy concerns. So that's how you can help us. You can also help us in the budget process, because some of these things have happened in the budget process, like reducing MPD's strength and force. That happened during the budget process. There was another thing. The SROs, the school resource officers, were eliminated from schools during the budget process. So please focus on the budget process. We're about to do our budget engagement forums, and almost every year for the 8 years I've been mayor, public safety gets a very small amount of people voting for public safety dollars. So think about that as you advocate. So last two questions.
Thank you. Good morning, Mayor, and good morning to the rest of your administration. My name is Kelvin Brown. I'm happy to represent Single Member District 7B06 and also chair the 7B Commission, and major props to the rest of our commission for showing up. Mayor, we also have a quorum here today as well.
Fantastic. All right.
So thank you so much to the full administration, and specifically to Chief Conti for all of your work in the Hillcrest, Penn Branch, Fairlawn, Randall Highlands, Twinings, Greenway, to help support our community, because one of the #1 issues that we face south of Massachusetts Avenue, for the most part southeast, is around violence, not necessarily gun violence, but property crimes, and we do have some carjackings, things like that. So all of your officers have been very good partners with us, and we will definitely like that to continue, as well as we would like to see more uniformed officers in our community, partnering with our community, getting to know all of our community members. Mayor, I'm kind of short here. Mayor, one of the things that you asked us is that how can ANCs better partner with your administration? The first thing that comes to mind is that we should leverage ANCs better. We have many ANCs here that are doctors, that are lawyers, that are housing professionals, mental health counselors. We have a skill set that we can bring to the table to help your administration push forward its missions and its goals to make DC the safest city in America. Secondly is that increase overall collaboration and communication, which you said that you would do. We absolutely are looking to partner. We just need some advance notice. The third thing I would say is being very intentional of opportunities for district agencies to partner together with one another and not be as siloed. I was speaking to the interim director for DPW and saying that MPD has crime cameras throughout the city. Well, there's a good opportunity for DPW to utilize that technology as well to help combat some of our environmental crimes. So let's work together across agencies, across the DC Council with ANCs to make sure that we're building a holistic solution that benefits our residents and our communities.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner. All right, you have the last question, ma'am. And then I'm going to go to each table, one person, one thing you want me to take away to work on.
Good afternoon. I wanted to thank you, Mayor, for bringing this platform forward for us to be able to converse. My name is Denise Blackson. I'm Commissioner Denise Blackson from 6E04. I just wanted to share that this is my second term as an ANC commissioner. I've been a community leader for a long time. And in listening to the different things that some of the commissioners have shared here today, I wanted to say that I have surveyed the youth in my community about things that we can bring that would interest them. I've walked around the neighborhood throughout the 4 to 5 blocks and asked different youth and some of the young adults in their 20s, what would they like to see come to the community? We do not have an open rec center or boys and girls club there. I'm in the Sursum Quarter, the former Sursum Quarter, now Banner Lane, which opens in a couple of weeks with over 500 and something new units. We have the Tyler House. We have the new Rise at Temple Court that's back open. bringing a lot of different constituents back into the community. But some of the things that the youth were looking for, they're into videoing and gaming, and different things are needed at the rec. I know they have some of the floats that have the studios on them now, and the kids are into singing and rapping and the different talents. We don't have any boys and girls clubs that have the baseball, basketball, football, boxing. This is just some of the things that the residents and youth in our community has asked for and asked that it be there. And we have the Tyler House who has a playground, but that playground is always locked. So there isn't anything for the youth to really do in the community. I wanted to share.
Hold up, Commissioner. Before, I can't let that one stand because we've just been talking about all the things for youth to do. Now, what we will take on is saying, do we need different things? And how do we engage people who aren't interested in the recs? But I cannot let stand that there's nothing for youth to do. I cannot. But we're going to continue the conversation about how we can better engage the youth that aren't not right now engaging our programs. So thank you for that comment. Now I'm going to throw something at our digital team to see if we can get an opportunity for the last word cloud of the one thing, not a paragraph, not even a sentence, but the one thing you want, one person per table. Nominate somebody, and then I'm going to go from the back, come down the middle, and then come back this way. Okay, back table. Can I have your attention, everybody? The one thing.
I would like for you to convene our Black men of faith and get them to go back into our schools and do the young men only meetings so we can get into the mind of these youth.
Okay,
and find out what they need and what they want.
All right, convene Black men of faith to go into schools to talk to Black boys. Got it. Next table.
Hello, I'm Commissioner LaRoya Huff, 4B10, and our table discuss meeting the kids where they are, early intervention and programming. One thing that I know that
what's the one thing?
It is meet the kids where they are, early intervention.
Early intervention with kids. Okay, this table, back middle.
Good morning, I'm Jasmine Romero, representing 1D04. My thing is loading docks. We have a problem with the parking because the business, they have the corridor, we don't have a space for that.
What's the one thing?
Loading dock. We don't have loading dock for the businesses in Mount Pleasant Street.
Okay. Okay. The one thing.
Good morning. One thing, expanded safe passage, both hours and numbers of sites.
Expanded safe passage. Thank you, Madam President of the State Board of Education. Expanded hours for safe passage and number of safe passage routes. One thing.
Focusing on social emotional learning in schools and guidance counselors, and if there is empirical evidence that supports increased school resource officers in school, publishing that.
Well, what?
If there's data that supports increased school resource officers in schools, publishing that.
Sure. I'm happy to share our feedback from our school principals and with the number of incidents that they've seen with reduced officers in schools. Yes.
Hi, Tiffany Johnson, 4B06. We're working with a public health approach, a holistic public health approach that includes services for our youth, meeting them where they're at, also housing, services.
Okay, well, what's the one thing, Commissioner Johnson?
Holistic approach.
A holistic approach to public safety. Got it. Thank you. Right here, the one thing.
Jamila White from 8A, the one thing we want to focus on is a concentration of poverty in wards 5, 7, and 8, the racialized income inequality, the racialized wealth gap, and the overall anti-Black racism that has been impacted through the decades, which resulted in investment in black communities, displacement of black communities, and violence of black communities. We've been talking about black people and black youth here and haven't mentioned the word black once. It is not white youth that we have been talking about. It's 50% black, 50% white in this community almost, and we have not been talking about the violence against black people.
Okay, so the one thing is violence against black people. Anti-black racism. Gotcha. Gotcha. Next question. Next table.
We're here.
Nothing here? Okay. Here? No, not yet. In the middle.
We've been here. We're here.
In the middle. Yep. Go ahead.
My name is Ashley Ruff. I'm a first-year commissioner for 7FO2. I think one of the major things.
One thing, ma'am.
I got it, Mayor.
Okay.
I got it, Madam Mayor. Give me just a second. One of the things that we have that we really need, and I'm going to chime with these young ladies, we need resources over here.
Mental health.
We don't have them. And it's so bad that people are getting locked up and they shouldn't be getting locked up. And Chief Conte and them should not be bothered with that. We should have resources in our own community for our own people. And that's another thing. They're going to bring a halfway house over there. But how you going to bring a halfway house to Minnesota Avenue if we don't have mental resources?
Okay. So talking about, and I won't comment on each one, but I'll comment on some as we go. Okay, the one thing.
We need a gun buyback program.
Gun buyback program.
Give certificates to the grocery stores, and the people will turn in the guns.
Okay.
It's worked elsewhere. People hand them over a couple $100. You have the grocery stores to throw some cash in. You can afford it.
Got it. Gun buyback. All right. The one thing. Oh, this table. Oh, there are two rows in the middle. Okay.
Yeah?
Okay.
No? Okay, my name is Patricia Guino, SMD 6C06, and what we need is police reform, because in 2020, when I marched with the Black Lives Matter, we were treated like trash. Our riot shields were slammed into our faces. There was mace sprayed into my eyes. But not only in 2020, black people are treated so badly by police, even now, to this day. So I want to know what steps are needed to be done in order to reform the police.
Okay, police reform. Next one. The one thing.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, for holding this meeting today. I'm Emily Singer-Lucio. I'm the commissioner for 5A03, and our table's one thing is we believe there needs to be additional substations within the boundaries of the MPDs, because the boundaries are too big. But part of that is also we need more foot patrol within those smaller boundaries.
Okay, substations and foot patrols. The one thing.
Environmental justice, that means livable conditions in your home.
Hold up. Oh, there you are. Okay.
Right
here.
here.
All right.
Environmental justice, livable conditions in your home, decent schools, no lead, clean water, air, and your environment.
Environmental justice. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Joy Doyle, ANC for HCO2. I'm going to echo that and really of trash and illegal dumping and the effects on crime that it has. We need a better partnership with National Park Service and DPW, and we need to be stopped. The practice of treating us through a monolithic lens to get this stuff done is unacceptable.
Okay. So would your one thing be addressing illegal dumping? Environmental neglect. Got it. Yes.
Hi, Linda Laughlin, 1C06, Adams Morgan. So at our table, the one thing we talked about is better wraparound services for our community members struggling with mental health issues or the unhoused, and getting information to ANC commissioners about how we can connect to agencies to make sure that that wraparound is actually happening.
Okay, wraparound services related to unhoused people and mental health, people who need who have mental health, consumers. Yes.
Hi, Kevin Rapp. Excuse me. Kevin Rapp, ANC 5E05. Our table discussed, as Commissioner Brown mentioned, more cross-agency communication, as well as drugs, specifically doing something about the open-air market along North Capitol.
Open-air drug market on North Capitol, and the first thing?
Cross-agency communication, specifically with technology.
Okay, better use of technology for agency communication, interagency communication. Okay. Your one thing?
Hi, I'm Commissioner for A05. We have an issue with gangs, and I would like to know what will be done about Latino, Hispanic, and El Salvadorian gangs and
Okay.
the prevention of them.
Okay, so your one thing is addressing Latino gangs. Got it?
My name is Carla Lewis, ANC 5E, and the one thing that I would like to see is unity in the leadership. So we don't have things like this DC code rewrite going through when most of the residents do not agree with it.
Okay, so
Unity in the leadership.
her statement was unity in leadership.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
And Mayor, real quick, I just want to remind people we do have the code at the table, so you can enter your one thing if you didn't get to speak. So these are generating. So if you didn't get to speak and you want to enter your one thing for us to take away, you can enter it there. So back to you,
Okay,
Mayor.
so we're going down the front row now, and we'll start here.
Everything I've heard my fellow commissioners say, but one thing, we need more. There's a shortage of teachers in our schools. We need more good teachers in our schools, and I want to know what can be done to bring them in and encourage teachers. We need more police. It isn't good for the community, for the police that we have to be doing so much overtime and to be such a shortage of police. We need more. And you mentioned about the budget, and that was the problem, but exactly what did you mean? What can commissioners do to support you in increasing our police force?
Okay, thank you, and I'll be able to address a couple of the ones that were heard as we close. Okay, so more police, more teachers. Okay, this table, any from this table? You've had a couple of comments. Traffic safety. Traffic safety, Southern Avenue.
Hi, Mayor. Thank you so much. This is Erica Green, Commissioner 8C04, Vice Chairman for 8C. With a hyper focus on mental health, we'd like to focus on financial literacy, environmental justice, expanding the idea of environmental justice, not just the outside environment, but everything from the inside of our bodies to our homes, to our streets. Gun violence, thank you, Commissioner Beal. We also want to see those violence interruption groups funded. I'm in Parkland just about every day. I see very familiar faces from Cure the Streets. I don't feel safe without them there. We want to see some gardening. We'd like to teach our residents how to live off of the land. Thank you, Mayor. We'd like to
I
teach
know
our
you
residents
have
how to
10
live off the land.
things.
We'd like to see MPD increase. We'd like to see increased funding for MPD, gun violence, focus on gun violence. And I'm a proud DCPS teacher. We'd like to see more funding in DCPS. Go catch them, Eagles.
Okay. All right. I can't pick your one thing, but so we'll take your list. Okay.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As a former civil affairs operative in the United States Marine Corps, what I get from this is what we're really going to need for our youth is at least to establish some arts, vocational, technical, and professional licensing, certification, training programs.
Well, we're all with you. So more vocational, technical certification for jobs for youth. Got it. Okay. This is the last one.
Paula Edwards for AO1, your commissioner, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner.
The elephant in the room, the federal government, and the role of the federal government in establishing a gray market, in bottling up our judge approvals, the U.S. Attorney General's office, and making sure that our senators, the neighbors of our neighbors' senators, advocate for us in the Senate and in Congress, because we have no power.
So
Thank
lack of statehood or statehood as it impacts our criminal justice system. Got it. All right. So we got a lot. Did you get the one thing? Oh, no, I didn't get your table. Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, he did. He was supposed to be the rep.
Oh, the gum. Parent resources and parent accountability. Okay. So as you can see, I think that those themes that we heard in the report out are consistent with what we've heard throughout, but I've also heard loud and clear better coordination, more notice from agencies about things that you can engage in and help us share with the public. I also heard ways that you can engage and advocate in policy debates and in budget debates, and we want you to really take that to heart. I will say, I take my experience as an ANC commissioner to the work that I do as well. And I think one big thing that we have tried to do is give commissions a way to communicate as a commission through our ANC portal. If your commission is not using the ANC portal, please, your chair and your secretary need to do that. ANC commissioners are, I can't believe I haven't heard this phrase all morning, but you are entitled to great weight, okay? As a commission, you are. So what does that mean? It means when your commission has a point of view and you vote on it in a public meeting by way of a resolution, we are required to respond to you. Not to agree with you, but to respond to you and let you know why we agree or why we don't agree. And the way that we have set up for you to communicate that to us is by way of this portal. So I want to make sure everybody is using that portal so your commission is speaking with one voice. For example, if you have a point of view about officers or teachers or a traffic safety measure that we're putting in place, the way to get your commission heard is to have it voted on. Now, you may say, well, I'm a single district commissioner. I'm going to send you a letter, or I'm going to call you, or I'm going to email you. Not the same thing. So on the big policy issues, whether it's policing or housing or education or DPW, the way for the whole commission to be heard is by voting on a resolution and putting that resolution in the portal. And then I also have a very good way to see if what our agencies are doing in response or not doing. So that is an excellent way, especially on the policy issues. On the constituent services issues, you have a decision to make. One of our first speakers said, you know, I have a full-time job and this isn't it. All right? And so what my suggestion would be to you is to engage all of the ways that DC government workers who are responsible for constituent services are helping you. But like tracking down every constituent issue is going to be very tough for you. Our jobs, your job is to advise us on what you're hearing and seeing in the neighborhood, and our job is to respond in the most efficient way possible. So we're always going to be looking for ways to do exactly that. So we've gotten some feedback from this meeting. We will report that feedback out to you, especially the action items. We also have in the tables in the other room a ward-by-ward resource guide that gives you phone numbers on what we think are some of the most frequently discussed issues. So the last thing I want to say is don't wait until things are at a fever pitch in your community or your neighborhood. If you see a problem, let us know. Let me know. Because we want to get in front of an issue as soon as we can to deal with that issue. So count us as partners in fighting crime in our communities. Recognize that we're having an issue with use of guns, people with guns, gunshots, and homicides. But because of all of the work that we're doing together, we have largely driven down most crime in our city. But as long as people are using guns, people won't feel safe. All right? So let's get to work. We're here to help, and thank you for being here.